Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast, powered by First National. I am Adam Pwadik, sitting here with Aaron Cameron at the Southwest Ontario Real Estate Forum. This is year 2 of the event. Last year it was hosted in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, and we did a number of podcasts there. We're back again, this time in London. I guess the trajectory for this conference is it will move around a fair bit. Our guest today, first one of the day, is Karl Innanen, Executive VP, Colliers International. Karl, welcome.
Thank you.
So Colliers you've been a long-time Colliers guy. I know that because I was at Colliers in 2010, and I know your name from the region at that
It's legendary
point.
Back then.
Yeah.
Long time at Colliers. I went to Colliers in 99, but a long time in the business. I started in the business in 1989. So coming up on 35 years this fall.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah. Has it gotten better or worse over the...
Do you know what? It's funny getting in, and I think getting in kind of a recessionary time was really good. I mean, I was in 89, and it was right at the peak of the market, and then I had to really grind it out for the next several years, and that really helps hone your skills. You have to really be good, or you're out.
That's a very consistent story that we've heard of interviewing individuals of your sort of genre that best time to learn, best time to be in real estate.
It was years too where you probably weren't going to make a killing anyway, so might as well amp up the learning, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
Presumably we're entering one of those stages right now.
I think we are.
Okay, cliffhanger. We'll get back to that later in the
I don't
conversation.
want to learn.
Yeah.
That's expensive learning.
Yeah. Let's just talk about your career, what you've done on the way through to where you are today.
For sure. So I actually went to school here in London. I went to Western and took economics. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. A bunch of my friends were getting sales rep jobs, that sort of thing. And I had a college pro painting franchise, so I understood the entrepreneurial bent. And this sounds strange now, but my father had been a real estate broker just selling apartment buildings for many, many years. I didn't really know anything about that. And I went and talked to him and said, I'm not quite sure what I want to do. Do I want to be a sales rep? Do I want to be a stockbroker? And he said, listen, Karl, commercial real estate is the absolute best job in the world, or it's the worst job in the world. You'll know in 6 months. And it ended up, I got into the business in 89. We were selling apartment buildings hand over fist. I asked him why he let me go to Western. And he said, hey, hang on to those commissions. It's up and down. You got to make sure you keep some savings to get through the rainy days too. So 89 was great. 90, when Bob Rae came into government, changed things drastically. That led to a real power of sale market in the early 90s for apartment buildings. And I, at that time, had left my dad, he segued over to property management, and I worked for a really strong regional brokerage called Whitney Summerfeld in Waterloo. And no one there had ever sold an apartment building, but they had really great connections to the lenders that had all the mortgages on the apartment buildings. So I started selling a lot of power of sale apartment buildings in the early 90s, really kind of honed that skill set and grew that multifamily business. And then Colliers came along and said, hey, why don't you expand that to a wider ranging investment business? And Colliers came into Kitchener-Waterloo in 99 and recruited me over. I went over there and then started working on all asset classes. So still, apartments are near and dear to my heart, and I've sold. The biggest portfolio I've ever sold is a $400 million portfolio in Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge and Guelph, multifamily. But I do all asset classes, and it's all exciting to me.
And you've been doing that basically since 1999.
Since 1999 and 1989 with apartments. Yeah.
My inbox is seeing a lot of power of sale flyers from brokers these days. Are you seeing that in this market?
We're seeing it, but it's nothing like the 90s. Like, in the 90s, there was way more leverage. There was way more undisciplined kind of lenders who put things on the market right away, and they took hits, which I think is informed now, where lenders are really working with borrowers and trying to work things out before pushing the power of sale button. I mean, we all have been waiting for it to happen more, and I think we're starting to see that. So I think we probably have seen that get going.
Can we talk about it just quickly? Because I think it is an interesting comparison or parallel. So in the 90s, it was undisciplined lending. And did rates pop? Did values come down? Like, what transpired to end up? And I mean, obviously, was there recourse, non-recourse? Like, maybe explain the crux.
Yeah, there was recourse. I think there was a piece of legislation that actually allowed you to finance an apartment building up to 85%, and then use the financial loss through that financing to get a rental increase. So when I sat down in my dad's office, he said, Karl, find me apartment buildings that are losing money. So it's like, I went to school for economics. That doesn't seem to make sense. And he said, no. This is how we do it. So you create a financial hardship through a regular first mortgage and a VTB, and then you apply to get a rental increase. You wait till you get the rental increase, and then the value's up, and you pay everything off. So that legislation hit a market that dropped drastically when they changed that legislation in Ontario when Bob Rae came in October of 1990. So the legislation changed retroactively, so you couldn't get those rental increases anymore. So everyone's sitting there with these money-losing apartment buildings because of the financing that had been put on them when they sold them, and that caused power of sales left, right, and center. The other thing that was happening at that time was there were a couple of consolidators very, very early on in the business, because as you guys would know, it was a real ma and pa, not sexy, not publicly traded, not institutional business. But there were a couple of consolidators that went across Ontario and were buying and buying and buying at high valuations, expecting that the market would catch up with them, and it didn't happen. So a couple of things came together at the same time to create this perfect storm. It was also recessionary, so people weren't able to pay their rents, higher vacancy. And it's funny to talk about vacancies in the 5 to 10% range in apartments, but that was happening back then.
So decoupled from today, obviously the apartment space is much more institutional.
Much more institutional, much more disciplined and professionally run. Like it was a Wild West cowboy world back in the late 80s, early 90s. We didn't know that at the time. We're in it. We're in the pot of boiling water. But those power of sales, people were buying things at just ridiculously low prices per suite and high cap rates. So they were bound to make money in the late 80s when that started becoming institutional. We started seeing REITs, and that public market started to grow. They were able to sell into that.
And if they held on till now, would have had a very good run in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Well, and you've also got now in this environment, got no vacancy effectively across the country. Probably a positive rental growth story across the country for the most part. So there's some underlying foundational metrics that save a lot of maybe poor decision making historically today compared to the environment you just described in the 90s.
Absolutely.
Well, after every recession, the idea is we'll never do that again. Never, never. And we're saying that now, right?
Yeah.
So we only get Karl for a couple of minutes. I mean, for whatever the time frame is. Let's just, because of your position and you're kind of you sit kind of across the Southwestern Ontario region, across all asset classes. Maybe we'll just kind of go around the horn. Let's go worst to best, if that's easiest. And you all know I'm going to go to office space. So maybe just talk about office at a high level in the Southwestern Ontario region and how it's doing and what you're kind of seeing and who the players are.
Yeah, so it's a really, really tough market. I mean, we heard in one of the sessions that I moderated, user sales being something that's happening, and that's great, but it's smaller buildings. Those are 20 and 50,000 square foot buildings. Conversions can't happen with each building. I sold a 110,000 square foot building in Waterloo last year. It's going to be converted to residential, but very few other ones really make sense. So it's a really, really tough market to be in if you're trying to sell a straight occupied office building, because the cap rate range that buyers are giving you, especially disciplined institutional buyers, are huge. Like they're talking about
8-10%, is that probably?
That's what I'm kind of hearing. However, private capital are interested in, hey, this is peak pessimism for office, so now is the opportunity. So we're actually seeing a lot of interest from private capital and people that maybe weren't in office before. Maybe they had other exposure to investment real estate, but it wasn't necessarily office. And they're looking for, these are high net worth individuals, family offices, folks that are coming in and saying, yeah, it's got to get better than this. This is the worst it's going to get. They're still looking at cash flows and how do you finance it and everything else. And there's lots of deal making that needs to go on with vendor take back financing or topping up, rental guarantees.
Well, that would be the
all that
next.
stuff.
That would be my next question. Like, I mean,
Is
I
it-
know it's
how
tough.
do you finance it?
Well, yeah, financing. I can tell you the answer is very challenging. But and I'll tell you from a lender's perspective, regardless of the cap rate and the valuation and the equity, and the issue I think we have is like where will rents end up in 3, 5, 8 years, right? And it takes that long of a cycle for things to kind of spec itself out, particularly in this post COVID work from home hybrid working environment. Where were rents? Let's just call it generally in sort of the major core centers of KW, London, Windsor. Perhaps where are they trending right now?
So they were mid to high teens. I think for new build, they've got to be in the high 20s, and we got a couple new build buildings in Kitchener-Waterloo, and I think it's going to take some time to find those particular tenants that want to be in those high profile buildings and pay those sorts of rents.
They were spec build?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Spec built. And everything looked awesome, right? You're coming into a market where vacancy was going down in office, things were really cruising, and then they went to build these and COVID hits. So a tough timing on those ones. But back to your question, I think that the rents that are now pushed back down to kind of $14 to $16 will push up into those higher teen ranges again. I think you also have to buy office that there's some other component of value add. Covered land play, there's densification in some other way, some conversion to some other use for part of it, selling off individual, like buying 3 buildings. I've got a property right now, 3 buildings. You can buy as an investment. You can probably, they're already severed. You can sell those off individually for more. So there's more needing to figure out deals. It's not just buy and hold anymore. And you were talking about lending. Institutional players, they don't want to be they have to go to a credit committee and say with conviction, we think this is going to make money for us. They're not there.
Can I do a audible here a little bit? We're going to keep going. We got 3 more asset classes, but I realized or dawned on me that we should probably spend a couple seconds, and office is probably a good place to do it, on just the vibrancy, energy, culture of the downtown cores. And I think the best way to do it is just do the KW, Cambridge area, if that's the best way, London, and then Windsor.
Right.
And that's kind of as a segue just to the strength of the markets, right? You always kind of think about the pulse of the downtown core kind of feeds the attractiveness in the economy. So maybe just speak to what you're seeing and how those 3 major sort of cities are doing in this neighborhood.
Yeah, and I think they're all in tough shape, unfortunately. And all of them were more vibrant before COVID hit. And all of them have challenges with trying to get people back into the core, trying to get people back to work. Because people aren't there, you see vagrancy and homelessness and those challenges that brings. So getting people back into any of those cores is the real challenge. In fact, talking to somebody last night that was saying, hey, the city should finance buying lunch for everyone who's in the core every Friday at noon. Like, got to come up with some creative way to get people back into the cores and get people back into office buildings. Because what we're really seeing is the work is getting done, but it's not getting done in the collaborative way you get it done, and the relationships aren't building. And one of the things I kept hearing when I was on calls for this conference and the panels was, this is like what in the market we're in or we're going into, it's about relationships and it's about reputation. So in the past, we were just collecting offers, and now it's something where we have to figure out who can actually do the deals and how can things happen. So I've strayed a little bit from your question about the cores and what's going on in those downtowns. But I think that even as you see in London, when you walk around here, a lot of construction going on. And I think the cities took some opportunity to do construction, but it makes it even worse as you're trying to get around and as you're trying to attract people to the core and make things happen. So I think it's a big challenge, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I think it's a multitude of little things.
Other than experiential office, we've talked about quite a bit, and you kind of addressed that. I mean, I don't mind an environment where people are actually having to work to attract people downtown. It does make for a better experience. But yeah, I think literally just the passage of time is probably the answer, which is unfortunate.
You'd think with the distance, the transportation, like in Toronto, obviously a natural comparison, it can be an hour and a half commute. So it's a lot harder to convince. I don't think those types of commute times exist in these neighborhoods, right? Like you think you're talking
it's like
10,
20 minutes.
Yeah, right? So you think there'd be a little bit more. What about the city infrastructure investment, or I would think zoning of apartments or zoning of residential in those to bring people to live in those neighborhoods? Like, is that happening?
It's happening, and it's actually happening. Like, they're handing out density like candy. and it's almost too much. And what we're hearing is people actually want to go not vertical. They want to get back to having their own little patch of grass. That's what being outside GTA means. So there's this real tension between what the cities and municipalities are giving the ability to build and what the market really wants. So unfortunately, I think that's going to cause an even bigger challenge with trying to get the housing crisis dealt with and make this something we can get a lot of housing built quickly and easily.
In the trajectory of worst to best, I'm going to read Aaron's mind and assume he meant retail would be next.
Like it's a close second, I would say it today. But anyway, I don't want to.
I'm more interested to see where you place the number one. I know you have a bias.
Yeah, of course.
We'll save it though.
Retail is third, but I feel bad because I think retail's doing really well for itself. But you tell us, how's it doing? How's it doing in the neighborhood?
I was asked in there, hey, if you had $1 million to put into something today, where would you put it? I'm saying retail, and I specifically what I was looking at was, I think retail has been really beat up. I think that if you have good covenants in secondary, tertiary markets, there's actually a little bit of an arbitrage to play between the cap rate you're going to pay out there for the same covenants, same construction, everything else, as you would in a major center in a primary market. So I think retail is good. And again, I mean, everyone talks about the covered land play piece, even not great covenant strip retail plazas with some extra land, putting some density on that. And again, conversions. I mean, there's lots of people looking at retail for different things, even self-storage or different types of uses. So yeah.
Predominantly local investors in that space?
Oh, absolutely. Like that's, I mean, institutional players in my mind in Southwestern Ontario are really wait and see and watching. And it's time for private capital. It's private players that are looking at deals, wanting to really kind of get in the market when they've been pushed out for so many years by the others.
Aaron's talked in the podcast before about being a young person in the industry and hearing, I think it was Slate talking about buying retail because it's always well located and the covered land play aspect, and you're buying large lots, and over the course of a decade.
Well, then the comment from it was one of the brothers, I can't remember Blair or Brady Welsh, but he said, at worst case scenario, it's a fulfillment center, right?
Yeah.
It's grocery anchored, and if groceries go away, it's a fulfillment center. Downtown or centerized of a neighborhood that needs it, right? Like you can't lose on retail in that space. I'm sure you can lose. You can lose on retail. It's clear. But
disclaimer:
very well located retail, you can't lose.
For sure, I think that's very well thought through. I mean, to get to a point where it's great.
Aaron, what's your number two then? Because I'm going to see. I know that.
Well, let's ask Karl. What's number two? Industrial or apartments?
Do you know what? It's really, quite frankly, a toss-up, and I think the toss-up is because of rental growth. I mean, you can say whatever you want about where you think cap rates are today, but rental growth is coming off on both of those asset classes. And when we're underwriting those and trying to figure out where the valuations are, that's the biggest question we have, because people were underwriting at such huge percentage rental growths that the cap rate was easy. But now everyone's backing off of that and quite frankly don't know where it is, because there are affordability challenges with how much somebody can pay for a 2-bedroom apartment unit in Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, in London and Windsor. But there's also going to be a challenge for your small business went from $6 to $15 for renting their 20,000 square foot industrial building. So we're hearing that. We're even hearing quite a few folks are coming up against, they're kind of my vintage, and they're coming up against the decision of, do I sign another 5-year lease for my little widget business, or do I retire and move on? Like, is this going to hurt the business too much to have that kind of change in the rents? So yeah.
Then another 5 years working for razor thin profit. Yeah, because you're busy paying the landlord.
Do you find investors are predominantly local in both those asset classes as well?
So I think that we do see more regional players. I don't know if we'd call that local, but regional players that look throughout Ontario.
AKA the GTA money.
GTA money coming out. And GTA money spills out when things are really tight in the GTA and pulls back into the GTA. So that's kind of the double effect that we get. And because of that, we've got a little bit more of a beta play in SWO opposed to GTA, where it's more ups and downs. So yeah, I think that we're definitely private capital focused. That's who we're going after when we're taking anything out to market.
If you're taking a listing out right now, what would be the easier process to run, industrial or apartment?
So I think apartment, so that probably answers your question of what's number one and number two. But interesting, because what we would do with that has really changed. We would have an exclusive listing, we take it out to our group, and we get multiple offers. These days, you're thinking about MLS, you may go MLS, you're definitely going priced rather than unpriced. So the strategy and tactics around how you take something out have really changed as the market dynamic changes. And that really changes what we do and how we do it. Because in 21, 22, you collected offers. I mean, you didn't have to work too hard at it. And now you have to really work hard at it. And you have to also help your lender understand, or your seller understand who's the lender. Is there a lender? Do you have to be the lender? Are there rental guarantees around this? What other pieces of the puzzle do we have to put together to deal make and be creative on a deal like this?
How's the development market in both those asset classes? I mean, clearly, let's go and make sure we cover everything. I'm sure there's nothing going on in office. Retail is really demographic driven, right? As the demographic goes, retail kind of follows. Industrial and apartments, though, like there still seems to be a lot of activity, or at least there's still the remnants of the desire to build more. How's that working out across?
I think that's an interesting way to put it, the remnants of the desire, because that's truly what it is. There was everyone is still got this momentum from, yeah, I can buy land and build industrial and get $18 a square foot for it and do that. But now that wave has hit the beach and it's dissipating fast. So I think that we will see those built. We will see those occupied. Those big industrial buildings that in markets like KW, Cambridge, London, Windsor, that they've never seen 300,000 square foot, 500,000 square foot multi-tenant spec built buildings. So that will really be telling to see how that works out. But my guess is those will be chopped down to 50,000 square footers to lease them out, because that's where the majority of the market is.
And apartments?
Apartments are just so hard to underwrite, as you know. I mean, where you guys were able to lend. We've even got people throwing in the land. Kind of, they have land and it's free because it was on another site, and it still doesn't pencil out very well.
For context, though, it's June 13th, and rates are coming down. Yeah, we're looking at 4.25 all-in CMHC insured rates, which I think skates a lot of pro formas on side, right? 4.5, 4.75 pens down. 4.25, you can still feel people going, oh, that's interesting. I could probably make that math work. So hopefully that adds some energy and some movement to the environment.
I've got a related question on that topic. Since you've already lived through a very deep dip in a cycle and back up, and we're talking about bond deals coming off, what should we be looking for indicators that we're getting into the next cycle?
Getting to the next cycle.
Yeah, that the sun's starting to break over the horizon.
Oh, okay.
What should we be looking for as the early signs that?
Adam's very hopeful today. Optimist. He woke up on the right side of the bed. Apparently.
That's awesome. No, I think the first interest rate drop gets people interested, active, signing CAs and looking and underwriting. I think the next is where we start getting offers and start seeing offerings and things come to market that then start to transact at adjusted cap rates and adjusted returns and adjusted prices. That will really be the leading indicator that we're starting to roll again and things are starting to move up, and it is the sun is coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's absolutely it. And I think as you said, the underwriting of multi-residential starts to happen in those low fours, triggering the deal and saying, I'm going for it. Yeah, that's the next step.
Yeah,
that's the next step.
2 minutes left.
Yep.
I wanted to just cover maybe the best way to put this question is in 2 minutes. Other than the three sort of major markets we've talked about, what else is going on in this neighborhood? Or are there other sort of smaller, sort of, I would call them tertiary markets that deserve a shout out for something that's transpiring or some growth or activity that you'd like to share with the listeners?
So I think what you need to look at is all the major announcements. I mean, down in St. Thomas with the battery plant announcement, any of those announcements creates a great spin-off effect, and that helps out all of the housing that's close. London will benefit a lot from that St. Thomas announcement. Other places in and around the area will as well. There's a big land assembly going on in KW right now by the region, and there will be a big announcement there as well. So I think all of those things are the things you look for, that then you start looking at, okay, that's going to create this in this small community that didn't have that before. What do we do next? And what else do they need? And where do we go for the next piece of the puzzle on that?
Unfortunately, we're out of time, Karl. Thank you very much for taking the time.
great.
I mean, we didn't really mention, I don't think, but you're hosting this event today, so you're running around like crazy. Yeah, you're chairing. So there's a ton of.
Late. Yeah,
Don't apologize. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks to First National for powering the podcast. Of course, thanks to Informer for hosting us here as part of the speaker video series. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.